Hey everyone, welcome to Our Small Footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. Welcome back to another video of my, the day in the life, kitchen, food prep, planning, preserving, and all that I do each month. So we did our supply run now. It's 4 weeks ago now, but I'm a little bit, like the dates on this is it's not quite current. So we're doing really well with food this month. I feel like I may have overcompensated a little bit buying a little bit extra this month because we ran so short last month, but we'll see how we go. The next trip is planned it's in 5 weeks time. As I said, I get back in 5 weeks time. So it's a 9-week stretch again for this one, but hopefully that means that the next trip will be a little bit cheaper, but we'll see. So it's still, in this video, I'm still working on getting through all the stuff that needs to be gotten through. I had pineapples that I've forgotten about and things like that, so I'm just going to share it with you. I was supposed to get this out yesterday and I didn't because I was slack. I run out of time to come out here and do the voiceovers, and we're working on that. Darryl and I have discussed the plans for where we're doing some firewood at the moment. We're clearing out some trees and it's not too far off the back of the house, and we might do a little lean-to type, I suppose you could call it a she shed, but that's not really what it is, but a little cabiny type thing, very simple for me, that I can sit at to try and do these voiceovers and stuff, so I'm still near all the animal sounds and everything else, but not too close to the kids' music and stuff like that. We do have the generator going today. I've got the mic pointed away from it, but you might hear it in the background because it is a very overcast today and we are charging the Jackery up to do some water transfer, so that might come through, but at least the lighting's good. I'm not going to get a face full of sun today. So let's get into it before I go and start dinner for the night. So as I said, I had actually forgotten I had pineapples. I'd put a lid on the box and put it up out of the way, and that's because the bush rat possum type critters that we get really like tropical sweet fruits. So I wanted to put it up out of the way, and then I kind of forgot that it was there until I went and inventoried everything that was left to figure out what I needed to do next, and realized that it was sitting there. So whoops, but that's life. So I needed to process them. Some had some very overripe spots. That's fine. These were a seconds box as it was, and then they'd sat there for a week or two or however long it was. But the chooks enjoyed all the extra bits and pieces anyway, so that's fine. I really like to buy pineapples because not only do I can it for pizza toppings, but I scrub them and use all the skins and cores for making cordial with. And pineapple is one of our favourite flavoured cordials. We love pineapple cordial with SodaStream. So the first step is to cut and sort the pineapples. I slice the ends off and then the skins. Now, I take a fair bit of flesh with the skins because I'm going to make cordial with these anyway, so it's not going to be wasted, and it saves me time on picking the eyes out of the flesh before canning them. So I just take generous, slices off the pineapple when I take the skin off because it's not being wasted. So it works well in that sense, and then the diced pieces just end up that little bit smaller in the jars, which is fine too. I generally run 3 bowls while I'm doing pineapples, so I have one for scraps, one for the skin and cores to use for the cordial, and then one with diced pineapple in it. That way I can sort of figure out what I'm doing with everything afterwards, but it's all split up and ready to go. The diced pineapple, generally speaking, gets turned into pizza topping a lot of the time, so I tend to just cut all the pineapple that is good into those little dice pieces because then it leaves me choice to do whatever I want with it after that point. And then I'm sure I had a couple of bowls of scraps that ended up going out, and I think I had to add another bowl for the diced pieces as well, and the skins and cores were overflowing too. I can't remember how many pineapples there were. There might have been 10. And they were really big ones, and most of them were still really good, so that was lucky that I remembered that they were there. Once I've done that, I start on the peels first. The scraps get sent off. I call kids in, as I said. I'm pretty sure there was more than one bowl, so I probably got kids to go and take scraps out and spread them between all the animals as I was going, and then refill another bowl of scraps sort of thing. And then I start off by mincing the skins and cores in the Thermomix. So the more surface area, the more juice and flavour we're going to get out of these. So cutting them really fine helps. It does mean that you'll potentially get a little more residue in your cordial because it will be harder to strain, but I feel like it's a worthwhile trade-off. So you can just cut them up if you want. You can just cut them up nice and small, dice them. I use my Thermomix because I have it and because it does it into a puree basically. So it's a puree of all the skin and flesh and everything else, and you can even see as it's puree that a whole lot of juice sort of gets up to the surface of that puree, so you're doing the right, you're doing well by doing that. As I mince it, I add it to a pot. The first couple of jugfuls, I get an average of how many cups of pulp I'm getting for a full jug, just so I have a ratio for adding water and sugar later. But being that the pineapple is high acid and you're adding sugar to it, it's not a huge deal, the ratios, because you can can pineapple on its own anyway. And I'm not adding anything that's low acid. Now, this is based off the Sally Wise pineapple scrap cordial recipe, but I have found that there's certain things that I change, partly because we use this as a soda stream syrup, and partly because of just our tastes and the way we like things to be prepared. The way she does it is with very minimal added liquid. So she puts all the minced or cut up whatever pineapple scraps and then puts very minimal liquid. I think it's only like a cup of liquid or something. I definitely use far more added liquid to what she has on her recipe because I want to make the most of the flavor. I understand the correlation between like more concentrated means less usage versus more diluted and more, but for us, I found that we used a similar amount whether I dilute it or not, and it goes further that little bit more diluted and doesn't seem to taste any less potent to us. I do tend to steep this for a lengthy period too, perhaps that's part of it. And as I said, I'm very generous with the amount of actual pineapple that stays on the skins and stuff, perhaps that's part of it as well, but we have found that I can add quite a considerable amount of water to this and it's still quite a significant, you'll see in the end that it's still a significantly coloured and flavourful cordial, and that's just the way that we work it. So I think I may add like a cup of water per cup of puree, might be around about what I add. But I sort of eyeball it by the ratio of the pulp that's in there to the water and the colour of the water and things like that. Again, nothing's low acid here and all that sort of thing, so the ratios aren't strictly important. There is a flavour factor here that you can, adjust for. I add some tartaric acid to the mix. This will help stop any chances of fermentation. You can add citric acid here too. So I use a mix of both in a lot of cordials, but with the pineapple's sweet but tart already, and I find by adding citric acid I have to compensate with sugar, and I don't like to do that because it just ends up too tart. So I generally speaking don't add citric acid to my pineapple cordial. I have in the past and possibly in other videos, but I found that I prefer not to with the pineapple flavored one. I add some lime as well. I don't know if I've got it pictured here. I either use cubes of frozen lime juice or I add some frozen lime slices, or fresh if I have it, whatever. I like the contrast of the flavours of the lime with the pineapple, and we're adding some acidity there without adding the citric acid as well, but it's more for a flavour profile than anything else here because I'm using home juiced limes and stuff. I'm not using store-bought stuff, which means that the pH isn't reliable anyway. Then I bring it up to a simmer for a good 15-20 minutes, put the lid on it and put it aside to steep. As I said, I let it steep for quite a significant amount of time, so we'll see when we come back to it I ended up with a lot of diced pineapple, and I still had quite a bit on the shelf for pizza, and at 1 jar a week we don't go through it super fast, so I decided to use some in other ways as well. One of the things I did was make a bunch of bases for the creamy. So Ninja allows you, in their book, to put certain soft fruits straight into the pints and process it without pre-blending. Some of those fruits are tropical fruits, like I'm sure it's like pineapple, banana and mango, strawberries maybe, blueberries maybe, I can't remember. They have certain fruits that they say you don't have to puree beforehand. I do puree a lot of the stuff that I'm making, especially if I'm making like apple pie type filling ones and things like that, but in this particular case I didn't. I wanted to give it a go. I tried a few different varieties, some plain pineapple, some with pineapple and mango, and some with pineapple and banana, adding a dash of coconut cream to each one to give that sort of, pina colada style flavour. And I think this will be great in summer as an alternative to smoothies sometimes. Obviously, it's not summer at the moment. We're going to eat them regardless. I'm not keeping them in the freezer until summer. But I think that they will be great in summer. Especially if we figure out the small waffle bowls over the muffin tin so I can make some in bulk. I never got around to doing that last summer. It's on the list. So last summer I figured out I bought a waffle, an ice cream cone maker, waffle cone maker, and I made ice cream cones for the kids, and they were delicious and they were superb, but they don't store very well and it takes a while to make a lot of them. And then someone suggested I could make little rounds and then put them over like muffin tins, and they could shape like little bowls, and then I could have, you know, I could make 12 at a time and they'd probably last the 2 days and be okay. Potentially crisp them up a little bit in the oven if need be, store them on the muffin tins maybe to keep the shape, I don't know, but it was something that I was going to give a go and see if it made the process a whole lot quicker. Having the new oven might help too, because the new oven's a lot higher, whereas I was trying to do the muffins down on the Camp Chef, which was awkward as well. But anyway, it's summer, I don't need to do it in winter. In summer, it might be nice if I had those little bowls and we had the sorbet style, smoothie style, fruit-based ice creams, and they could whiz it up during the day and have some of that as a snack when they're in and out of the pool and things like that. So we'll see, but that's an idea anyway. I also did a few layers on a baking sheet to put in the oven. I've got on my notes here to put in the oven, obviously my brain wasn't working properly. To put in the freezer of diced pineapple. This can be used in future creamies or in smoothies, or the kids just like to eat it straight off the trays from the freezer frozen. I flash freeze it on the trays and then transfer it to a container or Ziplocs or the silicone snack bags or whatever, and it doesn't stick together because I flash froze it. So you can just pull a piece out by piece. So things like I do this for a lot of fruit that we have an abundance of. The kids ate all the plums that I had frozen in pieces, the peaches, they eat the bananas frozen, blueberries, strawberries, pineapple. They quite like just eating the fruit frozen, just straight out of the freezer frozen, which is great because it means that the fruit that we don't get to, if we need to freeze it, they're still going to eat it as fruit, and it's not being turned into, not all of it is being turned into things like jams and stuff like that. Then I grabbed some jars out to can the rest. So I find these salsa style jars are enough for all the kids to get some on their pizzas, so I've been using these lately. I think they're a 300ml jar. I fill the jars with the pieces of pineapple and about a generous teaspoon of sugar into the top of each jar, and then fill with water. The sugar is optional here. Pineapple doesn't require sugar for canning, but I've tried both ways and I found that the pineapple lost so much flavour when it was just in the water. By adding that little bit of sugar, the pineapple retains its bright colour and its flavours and things like that, and it just works a whole lot better for us. I found that when I did it without sugar in it, that the liquid was quite sweet and pineapple-y, but the pineapple itself was rather insipid, and it lost a lot of its colour. So that little bit of sugar helps. You can make sugar syrup, like you can dissolve the sugar in water and pour it over. I don't find that necessary. I find that the small amount of sugar in the jar with water, and I try to use warm hot water out of the kettle, then I find that in the canning time it processes through and it works fine. I filled as many jars as I had pineapple left and gave the kids any scraps. They had been picking at it, eating it the whole time too, and I'm sure Darryl's grabbed some on video while I was processing it as well. I cleaned the rims of the jars with white vinegar and put the lids on firmly. Lug lid jars need to be done up really nice and tight, not like rings on ball mason jars which are only done finger tight. You want nice and tight on the lug lid jars. I decided to steam can them in my pressure canner, and that way I could stack them all in one go. So a rack at the bottom, the jars, about 2.5 litres of water, enough for the canning time but not so much that the jars were covered. Second rack and the rest of the jars. Once the canner was spitting a steady stream of steam and the pressure valve popped up, I started my timer for 15 minutes. After the 15 minutes, I turned the heat off, let it come down in temp a little bit and the little pressure valve to drop down. Then I crack the lid to let some more heat out, and then I pull them out about 10 minutes later, put them on a board, and they rest for 24 hours, the same as always. For dinner that night we had super simple nachos. I only filmed the finishing of them. I think my kitchen was just too hard to work in with all the pineapple stuff still going on and everything else, that I just threw a meal together and then just decided to make sure I shared it as I was finishing it off. So I lined a couple of half cookie sheets full of corn chips. I think I added chicken on these ones, the grilled marinated chicken thighs. I think this was the last thing I made with them before I stuck the rest in the freezer. And some black beans from the shelf, just that I had canned plain, homemade salsa from the shelf as well, and topped it all with a stringy dairy-free cheese that I cooked up in the Thermomix. This cheese might have ended up being a little too stringy, mind you. It was a little hard to spread over the nachos, but it did give a really good texture and everyone really enjoyed it, so that's the main thing. I ended up leaving the pineapple to steep overnight. It's getting down to 0 or below here, so it's not a big deal, and I'm going to be heating it up again the next day. So before I can add the sugar, we need to strain as much of the pineapple pulp out as possible. We used the flour sack tea towels again for this, the same ones that I used for the zucchini. As I said, I find them super useful for squeezing things. The quality of the weave and that just lends itself to tolerating the hard pressure of squeezing it to get lots of liquid out without the weave splitting or anything like that. I got Darryl to help me because I really struggle to squeeze things like that with my hands and stuff, and with my shoulder. It's just been a bit hard over the last couple of weeks. So we squeezed all the pulp to get as much liquid as possible. Once we had that, we put it in the pot. Now, sugar here is to taste. It's not going to cause the recipe to fail or not work or anything else. The recipe states 1 cup of sugar per 1 cup of liquid. We tend to do it to taste. Now, you do have to remember that when adding it to something like a soda stream, it does need to be sweeter than you would expect it to be. Like when you're tasting it, cordials are excessively sweet because they're a concentrate before you water them down. So you do have to add a fair bit of sugar, but everyone's taste buds are a little bit different. So I ended up using a 2 kilo bag with this pot. I can't remember what the capacity of this pot is. I'll have to look it up and I'll see if I can find it and put it on the screen. But the 2 kilos was plenty. It was plenty sweet enough, even with the lime juice and everything in there. So that's what we went with. I bring it up to a simmer again, stirring so the sugar doesn't stick to the bottom of the pan, and make sure that it's all well dissolved. You want to make sure that all the sugar is dissolved, because if there's any crystals of the sugar left in the cordial, when you bottle it up, it can crystallize. Not so much when you're processing it, but especially if you're doing this to go straight in the fridge, that sugar can recrystallize in the jars, and you end up with more sugar in it, which is fine. You can just reheat it and dissolve it again. And when you're canning it, it's not such a big deal because the heat from canning it's going to compensate for it anyway. But anyway, you want to make sure that the sugar is nice and dissolved. Once that was done, I started filling the jars. I normally use my Muddy Passata jars for cordial. They're my favourite for this sort of thing. They have a really narrow mouth and they look nice on the shelf. However, we broke the last bottle cleaning brush that we had the other day, and I'm waiting on a delivery of more. And they're too narrow to get anything else inside them to clean them well, so I used these wide mouth quart jars because I have those handled lids with the pour spouts on them, so I think that'll work fine for this. But I would have preferred my Passata jars, but we will get the new brushes and then I'll be able to use them next time. I filled the jars, cleaned the rims and put the lids and rings on fingertip tight, and then I put them in the steam canner. I haven't used the steam canner on the new stovetop yet, so I wanted to try that out. I had 9 jars to do and that wouldn't fit in one load, so I did 5 first and 4 second. After the first load had finished, I tipped some of the water out of the bottom and topped it up with cold water to bring it back down to hot but not boiling, because we want it the same temp as the cordial in the jars, not hotter or colder, because then we have problems with thermal shock. Now, with the steam canner, I have to get it into the dark green zone, and then I ran it for 15 minutes. This is a high acid, high sugar, so it's generally treated similarly to jam canning times. I don't think Sally Wise has a canning time for this recipe on her site. I think she says to store it in the fridge, which is probably why she's got the minimal liquid added to the pulp, because it's only a small batch thing. But again, I think she's got like 1.5 kilos of pulp and it's 1 cup of sugar. Anyway, 1 cup of water, I don't know. Anyway, I can't remember, but I'll try and remember to put a link in the description to her recipe for it. While that second batch was canning, I also made up the choc chip cookie recipe again. I made it on a couple of videos ago. Everyone really enjoyed them, and I wanted to try making them slightly smaller and things like that to see how they went in the oven for the second time. And so I was just scooping that onto trays and baking it, but using the smaller cookie scoop. I also baked them for a little bit longer so they were a little bit more crunchy, and we think we prefer them with that texture rather than the soft one. I think we prefer them crunchy, so anyway, we did that as well. Then, to mess up my kitchen even more, I made the same lemon butter chicken that I shared on a video the other day, but this time I used a couple of the split chickens that I roasted up first. I cut them into pieces and used them on top. I did it in 2 pans so that we got lots of sauce, and used broccoli and cauliflower in the base because that's what we have an abundance of that we need to get used at the moment. So the single pan that I made last time only just stretched, so I did 2 because it will make really nice leftovers. So I thought that if I did the 2 of them, then that would work really well. The next day I needed to get through at least one of the pork roasts. I actually thought I only had 2 more after this, but I had 4. So I probably should have been moving on these quicker, but I forgot that I had bought extra for sausages, and then I forgot to buy more sausage casings. So no sausages this month. We'll have to use it for other things, and I'll have to do sausages next month. We don't like to do sausages in summer because the flies are too bad, so I definitely, if I want to get a batch of sausages done, I should definitely do it the next supply run that I'm going on. So anyway, with this one I did my normal and filled the roasting trays with the small red potatoes that I have. Then I peeled the rind off the pork to be cooked over the potatoes. The fat will render from the crackling, and the potatoes will cook in that, and then the rind will crisp up, and Darryl and the kids will enjoy it hot. I can't eat rind because of my TN, and what's left can be used as training treats for the dogs, which we find works well. Using that much fat over the potatoes means also that I can bag those potatoes up. So there's 3 trays of potatoes there. We will not eat them all in one day. We might put them in the fridge, eat some tomorrow, but we still probably will have some left. So what I do is I bag them up in Ziploc bags to go in the freezer, and because they've got all that fat and lard attached to them and in the trays and that, when I want to reheat them, they reheat up really nicely in the oven because of that added fat. Once I got those trays in, I decided to turn the whole roast into sliceable pork. We can use this as cold meat for the next couple of days. It freezes fine too as cold meat. It's good to put in fried rice, all sorts of things, but we can also have it sliced hot for dinner tonight. I always slather my pork roast in Dijon mustard, and then I coat them with a crust. So the Dijon helps keep the moisture inside, and then the crust that I make also helps as well. So in my crust, it's a mix of brown sugar, smoked paprika, garlic, onion, salt, pepper, and mustard powder. And it's sort of a sweet and spicy mix that creates a lovely crust, but that sugar also helps keep the meat moist. Like, it's going to, as it dissolves, it creates liquid, creates that sort of charred sort of a crust, but it also helps keep the moisture in the pork. I coated it in 2 pieces just to reduce the cooking times after tightening and retying the elastics to hold it together. I cook my pork roast to an internal temperature of 64 Celsius or about 145 Fahrenheit, which is classed as rare for pork, which is fine because pork is classified as a red meat. By stopping there, then wrapping it in foil, it stays beautifully moist and tender. Now, by pulling it out at 64, it's going to climb a little bit, especially if I foil, so you're actually cooking it to a slightly higher temperature, but 64 is a good point to pull it out. And prior to this, I'd always cooked it well done, and it wasn't great. It's just chewy and a little bit tough, but by doing it, dropping that temperature, that internal temperature, and roasting it to a rare, when you slice it, it's almost like it's silky. It's really nice. So if you haven't tried a roast cooked to that internal temperature, I highly recommend it. I use a Inkbird Bluetooth thermometer, which is what I use to track the temperature of the inside of the new oven, as well as the internal temperatures of the roast. I should put that in the comments too, because it's something that I use all the time. And once it hits temperature, I pull it out, and I just make sure that that probe is in the thickest part of the meat. We had the pork roast sliced up with potatoes and gravy for dinner. I don't seem to show a plate. Generally, there would be steamed veg served as well here, though don't quote me on that. It was sort of a long day, and I haven't shown a plate, so I can't guarantee that there was green veggies on that plate. But generally speaking, we would serve that with steamed veggie as well, and then gravy over the whole lot. So that was another couple of days of getting through that food. So we got through the pineapple, got through one of the roasts. I still have all those other roasts to go through, so they're in the next couple of videos, because I checked the dates though on them, I think, and dates were fairly lengthy on those, so that wasn't too bad. But yeah, another couple of days of food sorting for the shelf. My freezer is chockers at the moment. We have put so much that we've processed and put in there, which is great, but it makes me want another freezer. And that's not a bad thing either, except that I feel like I thought that the freezer that I bought was going to be huge and I'd never be able to fill it. And now that it's full, I feel like if I get another one, then maybe I'll fill that one too. And it's fine. I rotate the food out, we eat it all, and all the rest of it, that's part of having the lengthy process. But the fridge is empty at the moment. I'll try and remember when I go in to get a quick clip of the fridge, and I'll put it in here. So the fridge is, basically empty at the moment while the freezer is packed full, because that's the cycle of how it goes. And the fridge can be turned into a freezer because it's a hybrid. You can have it either way, but I also need the fridge for the few things that are in the fridge, so that makes it hard. And then I thought about, you could get a smaller chest fridge, smaller of the hybrid fridges to use, but because there's not as much in it. But the thing is that at the beginning of the month, it's chockers as well. So anyway, I'm still figuring that out. So thank you for joining me again today, guys, and I will see you on the next video.